Good morning, everybody. It's exciting to be here and exciting to talk about AI. I think it's talked about everywhere, all at once, at the same time. It's a fantastic, fantastic topic. So my name is Kevin Bredd. I'm an audit partner at KPMG in the Cayman Islands. I also head up our audit technology and innovation team for KPMG Islands Group. I'm also a father of 3 young blessings. So what that means is that by day, I'm encouraging our audit staff to adopt AI in everything that we do so that we deliver on our promise to the capital markets to provide quality, efficient, and effective audits. And at night, I'm answering my 6-year-old questions about how and why everything works, which is fantastic. So he had that young age where he just wants to know about everything. And there's 3 outcomes that have now come to fruition through these interactions. The first one, I'll know the answer, I'll give it to him, he'll accept it. The second one is that I'll know the answer, I'll give it, but he's not convinced with it. So he'll say, Puppy, can you just check with the AI? At 6. And then the most likely outcome currently is he just goes straight to the AI and he says, Puppy, how does this work? And tell me what the AI says. Right? So it is absolutely everywhere. And at a macro level, we've seen this huge tidal wave coming, right? Last week, NVIDIA reached 5 trillion market cap. We have Sam Altman talking about wanting to spend another $1 trillion on AI. And then we have Satya Nadella talking about how there's this massive power shortage and the need to find power to essentially power these GPUs you have sitting in the sideline. So that's it at a macro level. But how do we bring this down to a micro level? How do we figure out where is the value in AI? I myself have had a number of meetings and workshops with clients locally, trying to understand where are they on their AI journey. And it's a wide spectrum, but most of the time, they're still right at the beginning stages, right at the beginning innings, trying to figure out how do they jumpstart their AI journey, how do they find their ROI, right? So there's this massive wave at a macro level coming towards the beach. Everybody's holding their surfboards. There's some people riding the wave. So here we're going to explore exactly where that value is at a micro level. Very excited to be here. And over to you, Max. First up on the block, you have some great technology, I think very relevant to the last panel. Matt was talking about using it to sift through due diligence. You've got something that works through a similar kind of use case. But please give us a lowdown in terms of how it works and the value you're driving.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Great to meet everybody. Great to be here. So Brightwave is essentially enabling investors to go from what I say, 0 to 1 orders of magnitude faster with sentence level attribution. So what that means tangibly is a number of workflows across everything from sourcing to diligence to portfolio management. You have a set of workflows where you need to get across a large collection of documents to derive very specific insights and create decision documents. That could be memos, it could be presentations, etc. And this is a perfect sweet spot today for LLMs. And so we built a system to do that that's enabling things like, for example, someone who would typically take, let's say, hours or days to produce the first cut of investment committee memo, doing that in minutes, and then flipping the time where they're spending 80% of time of data collation and 20% of time of analysis, flipping that ratio. So very exciting times and working with investors of all stripes, from the kind of boutique 4-man shop up to the mega caps.
Awesome, Max. And just to build on that, right? So huge reduction in time. What about the quality of work? How does that compare to the traditional approach where you're just throwing hours at it? Yeah, tell us a little bit. And how do you go about assessing that?
Yeah, so look, I think one of the important ways that we always have to frame large language models specifically is, they work probabilistically, not deterministically, which, by the way, human beings are the same way. And so I think the frame is, okay, this is like a first-year MBA associate who I can give massive, massive context to go execute a set of actions and then come back to me once they're finished. And so again, whether that's a table, whether that's a PowerPoint presentation, a memo, the expectation is not, okay, this is the easy button and it's going to be absolutely perfect. Human beings make mistakes. LLMs make mistakes. The opportunity is cutting the time from 0 to 80%.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So just to also frame our discussion, right, there's going to be 3 key themes we're going to explore. We're really going to dig into, obviously, value. We're also going to have a look across the future over the next 12 months. Very hard to predict in AI. It moves extremely fast, so we might break that down into quarters. And then we're going to round out the discussion around the responsible use of AI, some of the risks, some of the key governance things that you need to make sure you have within your organization. Because if you move too fast without being responsible, that's when things break, right? And we've seen the headlines where, hallucinated AI has been used and people haven't necessarily verified or corroborated the work. So Tamer, over to you. Mintus builds end-to-end applied AI systems, agentic deep learning for data cleansing and risk management and decision-making at financial institutions. What's the hardest part of proving value when you're dealing with fragmented decision-making and fragmented legacy data? And thank you very much for making the trip across the pond.
Yeah, thank you. So we're a UK company, and as you said, work with the finance and real estate sectors. And we have a platform that's a multi-agent applied platform, which means like we use deep learning, analytics, and Gen AI to come up with bring the fragmented data across organizations to make decisions. I guess our biggest differentiation is that we work with PhDs from Stanford and University of Chicago, although we're a UK company, and bringing human in the loop into decision making is one of the biggest differentiators, because it's all AI. It's one thing, but when you bring human beings into the loop, the performance goes up 45% at least. And then especially on risky decisions, it goes all the way up to 79%. And the other interesting thing is that, like, listening to a couple of conversations today, Nurul Rubini said that EU was like a museum, which was quite interesting. We're about like 10 to 15 years behind US in that sense. And amount of money, investment, research goes into AI here compared to the rest of the world is quite interesting. And then if you take like the big guys like the BlackRocks and everybody else out of the equation, there's still 30 trillion assets under management managed annually in those countries. So there's a huge opportunity, but they're quite, they don't know what to do and they don't know how to do it. And then there's a lot of interesting change management, situation goes in there. So I think it all starts with there's so much data across the organization. There are silos. How do you get to that fragmented data, build it into a one unified database where you can use various AI tools to come to decisions on that one is the question that we're trying to answer. And then with the goal, I mean, it cannot be a POC. It has to be like a deliverable results. So how do you actually improve the performance on investments or what have you, or how do you reduce the cost is the thing that we're trying to answer. So moving from that POC to real life applications is the biggest thing, because the moment you prove that, it becomes such a no-brainer.
Great, I love those comments. I'm very curious about, it sounds like the previous panel resonated with you in terms of the investment going into AI. How do you stay competitive given you're across the pond? It does sound like you got some US counterparts. Yeah. And then after that, moving from POC to production, what are some tips or what are some real life examples, anything you can provide the audience in terms of contexting and tips and tricks of the trade, let's say?
I guess the biggest difference between US and the UK in that sense, there is abundance of money over here. And big bets are made. With those big bets, you get big results. In UK, which Tim probably knows that really well too, there are a lot of bootstrapping, goes through. So you build things on a kind of like smaller budgets, smaller teams. But once you've proven your model, it's much more kind of like, there is more sureness, success that you have. So, and I guess it kind of like fits the market's needs. Also, the market, moves, a little bit, smaller and everything else. And they're still quite, fragmented in they're all kind of local, although everything has become global, but financial institution and real estate still, local markets. The second part of your question is that it's all with, I guess, typical life of a startup. You get so many opportunities, you have very few hours, and a very, very, active team. How do you prioritize? How do you go after the right customers? I guess the biggest challenge comes from that, you can finish a proof of concept And it takes about 12 months to get to a contract, from that. So when I was at Microsoft, that was not a problem. You could make the investments and everything else. But with a startup, you have to measure that, timing very nice. It's a constant, balance act. But that's what I guess what makes, startups quite exciting in a way. You live always on the edge, but once you, make it, you really make it and create a differentiation.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks so much for that. So now we're going to move on the other spectrum of a startup. We're going to go to BlackRock. So Hema, thanks so much for joining us. And as I understand it, you're the lead on the internal AI project. So can you give us a bit of a breakdown of what's BlackRock doing internally around AI? What's something that you've developed that you can't live without on the AI space?
Absolutely. So thank you for having me here. So AI is not new at BlackRock. We've been using AI, traditional machine learning, for a long time, especially in financial engineering teams, investment teams. But obviously, like everyone else, since generative AI has boomed in the last few years, there's been a growth in AI projects across the firm. And so we've got a mix of all vendor technology that we use, just like everyone else, as well as internal R&D projects. There are some things that have been at production, some things are still in prototypes, and how are we going to make that shift going into next year? My team actually has been focused on the client lifecycle. So we're doing a lot of internal R&D, all the way from innovating new products using AI and looking at the data that figure out what clients really want in their new products, to how do we sell to our clients? How do we onboard new clients and portfolios using AI much faster? How do we maintain relationships and sell to our clients? And then how do we maintain and service with those existing clients? So we're building AI, looking at internal CRM data. We're applying AI to any other licensed data sources that we have. So like Tamer just pointed out, data is a huge part of it. And so a lot of our focus is on how do we clean up our data sources? How do we build in a combination of Gen AI and traditional machine learning to provide the right kind of products to make our clients happy? So that's our end goal. A big part of it is also enabling all of our teams, all of our software development teams. Traditionally, there's been a lot of machine learning research teams partnering with universities that have been doing the AI work. Right now, because of Gen AI and how easy some of these models are to use, we want to actually enable all of our software dev teams to use these products. So how can we build AI into our tech stack right from the get-go? So we're building AI platform, can enable all of our software teams to have access to data, the models, the guardrails, all the types of checks and balances, basically, so that we can have anyone actually build things from prototype all the way to production.
Awesome. And BlackRock's a massive ship, right? And it's difficult to get big ships to move fast. Are you, in terms of how BlackRock is moving, how fast is the pace at BlackRock, and what are some of the struggles when dealing with such a big organization?
That's a good question. I would say for a large organization, we move pretty fast. My team just put something to production end of September, and we're putting a brand new other product into production in 2 weeks. So a month and a half between two big products is pretty huge.
That is impressive.
And when I say production, we're launching it to over thousands of users internally. We have access, providing access to hundreds of thousands of client data at that same time. So it's moving pretty fast. As long as we can have, these tools in the hands of all our software dev teams, like I mentioned, enabling, our users to have access to the latest AI models coming from, the big large language vendors, as well as small language models too. We can move as fast.
Amazing. And it's also a challenge to keep up to date with all the LLMs that keep coming to fruition, and they keep hitting, my feed, and then you got to assess them from a governance perspective and whatever else. So it's a very fast-moving place, and working at big organizations sometimes is very challenging. So I'm going to go right into Atul here, who works at Accenture, and you obviously have a very forward-focused AI firm. Tell us a little bit what you're seeing, both from an internal and external perspective. You obviously see it across the industry, and it'll be very interesting to hear about your perspective.
Great. Thanks, Kevin, and glad to be here. And yes, Accenture is AI forward in all our public pronouncements and the work that we're doing for our clients, and frankly, even for ourselves. AI is literally interwoven with everything that we do. I will start with your question, Kevin, on how are we transforming internally. If you look at what we do as a business, we're the world's largest professional services company, close to 70 billion in revenues. And essentially, it's people-driven. It has been people-driven all this time for at least 3 decades, if not more. And I'm even talking predecessor, Andersen Consulting. If you look at what's happening within Accenture right now, whether it's the firm mollycoddling people like us, MD, or mollycoddling our staff, or even using a carrot and stick to be AI forward, it's happening. And we are transforming significantly internally on how we operate as a business and how we operate internally. For our clients, it's changing. It's changing significantly. So as an example, a little bit about myself, 25 plus years of being a consultant. I've run practices, I've run client portfolios. I run a client portfolio today. I also run our strategy business for financial services in the US. If I draw parallels using automation, whether it's AI, GenAI, NLP versus now, I'll give you two examples. So in 2018, 2019, for most of the people in the room, you'll remember there was a big event in terms of identifying exposures to LIBOR as a benchmark rate, and identifying where there could be situations where SOFR, as an example, could be used as a benchmark rate. So what you had to do was, and I'm sure some of the startup founders in this audience will relate, you had to go through covenants, you had to go through agreements, whether they were bilateral agreements or tripartite agreements, syndicated loans, etc., and identified counterparty exposure, right? I would say on an average in the 2018, 2019 timeframe, it was a 6 to 12 month effort helping our clients to get to that point, depending on the size of the institution and the size of the covenant universe that we were looking at, which obviously meant a lot of revenue for firms like us, a lot of effort from our clients, et cetera, et cetera. If I draw parallels with an example that was just given a few minutes ago, you could just put an LLM or a SharePoint and get to that answer. I'm simplifying it, but you could get to the answer fairly quickly. What's changing today is what we as a firm call process reinvention with the advent of AI and certainly Agentic, where processes are being transformed to be largely Agentic with humans in the loop. I'll give you an example of it's not a recent podcast, but I heard it recently. It's on the BBC. I urge you to listen to this. It's called the Reith Lectures. It was a 4-part series on AI. Anyway, long story short, the guy who was delivering the podcast was the head of robotics and AI at Stanford. And somebody in the audience asked him, so what does this mean for our children? Do we need to gravitate our kids towards STEM? And he said, not really. He said, well, if Kevin's a software engineer and we leave him to his devices, the world will come to an end, right? He was joking. And I'm joking too, to draw a point. But you do need people like the others on this, as an example, others on this podium. I'm an ethicist, he's a philosopher, she's a linguist, ethicist, so on and so forth, all to keep you in check, right? So the construct of how automation, AI, GenAI, AGI is changing is different today. It's agentic, it's actually reinventing processes to make it more efficient and hopefully more accurate. Lastly, what I would say is what we're also seeing is a term that you use, which is the advent of responsible AI, which is how do you manage to reduce bias, ensure fairness, and prove it to your internal risk stakeholders as well as regulators, and in fact, your market participants as well. So hopefully that answered the question, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, that's music to my ears. We're very similar to KPMG in the sense that we have 3 guiding core principles when adopting AI, and that's making sure it's values-driven, human-centric, and trustworthy, right? So those are the 3 guiding principles. I think they resonate with what you mentioned there. I do want to press a little bit on your internal focus, right? I think in these large organizations, sometimes it's quite difficult to get everybody rowing in the same direction. Is that something that you're finding quite challenging within your organization? I can say I've definitely found it challenging within mine at different levels of the demographic. And we're doing some exciting things. It's the first time globally we're holding a build your own agent competition, which I'm quite excited about to see what the outcomes are. But yeah, I would like to hear your view on how do you get everybody rowing in the same direction.
Absolutely. I'll give you what's been announced publicly recently. So our fiscal year just started. And yes, as many other large companies do, every once in a while, I think it's a little too often at Accenture, we've reorged, right? And the biggest reorg we have now is to be truly AI forward. So I used 2 terms a few minutes ago, mollycoddling and carrot and stick. I think the mollycoddling is over. our leadership, so Julie Sweet's the CEO, and the management team is now, I wouldn't say pushing the organization, but yes, nudging the organization to move in that direction, whether it's training, whether it's getting more articulate with our clients on what to do, whether it's assembling teams to actually answer pretty meaningful AI discussions with our clients. And frankly, even using our internal AI tools, and there's many. So as an example, we just went through performance cycles for our staff. There's a significant amount of AI tools that we use internally to evaluate staff with humans in the loop. And now the firm is saying, you have to do this. You have to, the only way to be AI forward is not just doing it for our clients, but also doing it for ourselves. So I'm a big fan of this. I believe that if we can change our DNA slowly to get to that point, it's even more meaningful for our clients and us as a company, and to maintain market share.
Brilliant. Very, very exciting. I think we can unpack some more of that when we get to the risks and governance around AI. But over to you, Tim. Last but not least, tell us a little bit more about viaNexus. We understand that you're using market data, you're feeding into AI. Data leakage is always a very big concern for the investment management industry or asset management industry. Please break it down for us. What's the value viaNexus is providing and the solution you have?
Sure, thanks, Kevin. So a year ago, three of us did an asset purchase from a US exchange called 𝐼EX, and we acquired 3 million lines of code. We've turned that into a huge big data platform that can onboard a wide variety of different types of data. And we normalized that data, and we were distributing that out through very fast APIs in the form of market data, real-time prices, fundamentals estimates, all the raw materials that you need. And some new technology came along called GenAI, and a big flaw in GenAI is the generative part. What you don't want as an asset manager is data from a model that's been assembled from the internet. You don't want your LLM to reach out to the internet and grab prices, because that data is not licensed for use in a professional workflow. So what we fundamentally solve for in the AI space is delivering fully licensed data directly to agents. And that might sound easy, but the whole licensing model that supported market data, which was really invented over the last 40, 50 years by exchanges, by big firms like Bloomberg, was predicated on large, bulk, bundled enterprise licenses, very often driven by the number of users in the company. And these the amounts of money that firms like BlackRock are spending on market data is astronomical. And of course, everyone's rubbing their hands thinking, hey, now we have a whole new slew of use cases. Agents are going to start consuming data. So our mission is really to change the dynamic there. And we've built a set of agentic services that sit on top of market data, on top of our platform, that entitle agents at the agent level to subscribe to and consume data. What that really means is the big issue around generative AI solutions and agentic solutions is hallucination. And a lot of solutions have been put in place when it comes to text-based content. But as I say, if you can't afford to not have a much more deterministic output when it comes to market data, and you see this issue with licensing kind of come to the fore with a lot of firms deploying agentic or chat-based solutions for their staff. So you're hearing about GPTs and copilots being deployed across enterprises that rightfully kind of mine the internal data of the company, that perhaps have access to a repository of internal research or maybe broker research, positions, other information. But if you were to ask any of those GPTs, what's the current price of any stock in my portfolio, the chances are that price is going to be either scraped from the internet if you've not designed your system well, or it'll be 15 minutes delayed or yesterday's price. So how can you have an agent or a co-pilot that's watching markets on your behalf if they don't have access to a real-time price? So we've built a real-time price And that's available through our agentic services to anyone building a copilot or an agent. So you can ask that question of an agent, monitor the market, tell me when something unusual is happening, and when that happens, grab the news. Listen into that earnings call that coincides with the other earnings call that I'm listening to, and tell me if something is being said that's adverse to my position. You can't do that without having real-time access to data. So again, our mission is to, one, change the dynamic with the way data is distributed into asset management workflows, but actually to build that so it's future-proof, ready for this agentic world.
That's incredible, and I think it's very, very interesting. I'm curious to know what other use cases does this potentially open up the door to that were never available before without the advent of GenAI and AI agents, right?
Well, I think the main one is as opposed to a much more kind of a proactive way of engaging with an LLM or Gen AI solution where you're asking it a question, it's maybe doing some research or looking at that SharePoint repository. You can actually tell an agent, and you can actually vibe code and build an agent where the requirement is to actually go off and monitor a market, to actually be running in the background while you're doing your day-to-day job. So these autonomous agents, I think, are going to become more and more common. We don't really have them right now. We haven't given that autonomy, one through fear, one through the regulatory need to have the human in the loop. But the reality is the markets are moving so fast now, and they're so complex. And when I was an analyst, I could only really cover about 12 or 13 stocks. I was an analyst at UBS. And beyond that, I was into diminishing returns. Now I can actually write more research. I can cover more stocks, but I can't monitor those stocks. I can't watch the depth of the equities that I'm following. I'm not listening into Rabini, who's just been speaking, and triangulate and go, oh, he's just said something that's really important that impacts one of my stocks. So I think the notion of agents as true co-pilots, as opposed to a co-pilot helping you sift through that huge amount of data, I think that's where we're going. And based on the speed that we're getting there, it's kind of like next week. It's not a year or two out.
I think that's a great segue into our next section, which is really just exploring the next 12 months. We've said the word AI agents a lot, right? And I know it's a word that's been around for a fairly reasonable amount of time, but I think it's probably quite important just to level set on what we mean by AI agents. I'm going to offer up my definition of an AI agent, but I'll definitely welcome some other views. So in the most simplistic terms, it's essentially just giving the AI agency, right? So it's providing the AI with the ability to act on its own, make decisions, find solutions, and deliver results. Recently, 𝐃𝐫𝐢𝐯, the ex-lead AI for Tesla's full self-driving, commented that he believes that agency is actually greater than intelligence. And the reason why he said that is that intelligence just sits there, but agency allows you to actually action things, do things, provide value and results and solutions to your problems. My wife loves giving me agency, although I'm not sure how often I deliver on what she's asking. So that's my definition. Does anybody else want to offer a view, anything, important things I might have missed?
I'll give you one. It's not as illustrious as the one between your wife and you, but I think the comment you made about Accenture, transforming internally or reinventing internally with AI and Agentic. So I'll give you the example of CRM. I'm sure everyone in this room has used some version of CRM, whether it's Salesforce or some homegrown solution. I remember when I made partner, 14, 15 years ago, I was given, I think, access to Salesforce. I had no idea what the hell this was. I used to maintain everything in a spreadsheet. But then I got used to it, and it was pretty useful. I mean, in terms of next best action, clients, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at what I use today within Accenture, our internal CRM system is totally driven by Agentic. So let's say, I'll give you an example. Kevin's my client. It will monitor any signals in the public domain, and in some cases, private domain about Kevin. It'll give me canned responses, not canned, but meaningful responses about you based on the day, based on what I'm engaging with you on, and it'll give me suggestions of how to re-engage you on certain topics. So not only is it maintaining your client record internally, it's monitoring your interactions in the public and private domain and giving me insights. So I call it next best action on steroids.
And maintaining your database. Nobody wants to be inputting data.
Totally. And then, it's the firm has had us trained on prompts, prompt engineering. I just think it's a new way of English, right? And is giving the CRM in this instance agency. So as an example, when I meet with you today, I'll go back and I'll type in with my understanding of prompts of how this interaction was. Let's say you're at a conference next week and you talk about something similar to what I've been talking to you on. It'll give me a canned response in terms of how to re-engage with you on the topic. So it makes my interaction with you and my clients a lot more meaningful. And yes, it's taken a lot of, I would say, manual intervention and guesswork out of the system. Now, in my business, does it take away gut? No. Does it take away hustle and grit? No. But it significantly transforms the way I engage with my clients with assets and tools that I have internally, if that makes sense.
I'll use 3 use cases and how it kind of like gets so exciting, like accounting, you would say, is not that, exciting.
Well, no, wait, hold on.
It comes from KPMG. So we have built this library for this bank in GCC in Gulf that they loan about 151 billion US dollars a year. And they have 250 people in their risk department. And the biggest problem that they have when they get the management accounts from the applicants, it's very difficult for them to normalize that data because everybody does things differently. They don't take the loans from shareholders, put that into loss accounts. They don't do this, they don't do that. So we built about 832 agents to take this management accounts data from various different companies from various different countries doing various different accounting rules. So these agents go in and then just normalize that data. And then that way you have like a one standard management accounts, balance sheets and things like that you can look at. But look at the applications that can apply to a banking industry, that can apply to a hedge fund picking up a stock. You can do a private debt. With the private debt, you can look at the underlying debt and then find out the real-time net asset value calculation. So it just gets very exciting. And then you can also, without going to an IT, you can rewrite that agent yourself. You can say, I want you to look at this compared to FTSE 100, look at the S&P. And you can write your own agents to look at things differently. So that 800 could be 8,000 if you wanted to. So that's one example. The second example is a very large European asset manager. They're managing about 51 billion euros. And they have Excel spreadsheets that they built from the 70s. They still use the same things, macros after macros after macros. It takes them about 3.5 days to update these Excel spreadsheets. Then they go to Bloomberg and then get the Bloomberg data, which they pay, a lot of money to that. And which Tim will talk about it. I mean, that is completely, went from like $30,000 to $300 right now. That's how it's being challenged. And so with that asset management firm, not only we take that fragmented data and put that into like a one, SQL database, but we're able to get the external and internal information. And then with that, understand how they make decisions and then have them check their decisions if they're taking the right decision or not, but never let the AI make the decision yet. So we're not there with them yet. And then the third example, we work with this real estate asset management company. They manage about 141 shopping centers, and they have about 12,000 tenants. And each contract has 42 different caveats and this and that. How do you negotiate the rent with, like, let's say Adidas, who's paying 12% below the market? It completely changes the conversation around their footfall, how they look at the things, and then how you can actually move them from one location to another. So the whole thing is getting super, super interesting with, getting more, revenue, cutting your costs, or making, better decisions in that sense.
I think one thing to add is, to the degree that what I've found, you underemphasize and underuse terms like agent and agentic, I think you'll be more successful. What we're finding is, especially for people who are, non-technologists, which is most people, what we find to be successful is, okay, let's anchor to that thing you're having, that memo you're having to produce today. These documents that are incoming, the tables you have to produce, the PowerPoint presentations, the memos. You see how before it took all of this? Watch how this system is decomposing the question, the prompt you're providing. It's making a set of assumptions based on prior interactions. It's building out these drafts for you super fast and giving you visibility into what were some of those assumptions that it took. And what we're finding is that moment of like, okay, now I see what you're talking about, versus leading with we have this agentic system that can blah, blah, blah. It's like, whoa.
Awesome. Thanks. Hema?
Oh, I was just going to add, basically the three areas that we're trying to apply AI for are increasing productivity, increasing revenue generation, and reducing risk, right? Most of these solutions that we're looking at, basically, I think they fall in the productivity bracket. There are some capabilities out there that are increasing revenue and reducing risk, but all these co-pilots and summarization tools, things like that, they're most on the productivity side. So one of the examples I want to share at BlackRock is, when we onboard a new client or a portfolio, there's hundreds of processes this has to go through before we actually fully onboard the client. That could take from several months to over a year. So if we can build agents, and like I said, the word agent is used very broadly. There's agents and there's also automation, right? If we can build agents or some automation to, replace even a few of these processes. So if you can, replace some of the manual processes to automation or agentic, that can reduce risk so there's not mistakes done by someone typing in something every single time. Can we speed up the process using agents or automation? That will increase productivity. At the end of the day, if we can bring on a client or portfolio in less than 6 months, 3 months, that's going to increase revenue, right? It's going to start generating revenue from a much sooner date. And so these are some of the ways that we're trying to build in, agentic systems, automation all together in these flows. But it's not going to happen overnight. There's hundreds of processes. All of them have to be figured out. What's the data, landscape look like? But I'll say, we're talking about all these crazy cool, AI capabilities, but productivity is really where we're seeing most of the gains. They're simplistic, summarization, writing content for you. They're right off the shelf large language models that do it for you, basically.
Yeah, so I think we've got a good set of what we see AI agents are and orchestration, which essentially is how do you manage all these AI agents once you've developed them to make sure you're continually monitoring that they're doing the right things, right? And it's exciting, but it's also has a lot of caution around it. One of the things we have at KPMG is called a rapid value assessment. And what that does is it looks at your company via LinkedIn and other social media platforms and assesses, given these are the different people at these different job levels, this is what the general tasks to break down each job title into specific tasks that generally accompany that specific title. And this is potentially what your productivity gain would be, to your point, Hema, really focusing on what's the productivity gain. Also, quality is also very important. Are you improving the quality? So how do you see this evolving in the next 12 months, right? What are you most excited about? What do you think is going to come to fruition? I heard you mention vibe coding. For me, vibe coding is super exciting, and I've had a lot of fun trying to do it myself. But I don't think it's quite at the stage yet where you can just vibe code on yourself without necessarily a subject matter expert, just to make sure it's not doing anything that it's not supposed to be doing. So anybody want to take that one first?
Well, yes. So vibe coding is empowering, but very dangerous. And like all these solutions that are coming up need some guardrails. That said, if you go to our platform, we've based on our what we call the viaNexus agentic services technology, we vibe coded a chatbot, and the chatbot basically just sits on top of our data, and you can ask it about any of the data that's on our platform. And so you can ask it like, how's the market doing today? How's the Mag 7 doing? And explain why Amazon is outperforming the market. And it will access all of that data. So allowing someone to vibe code, but within the constraints of the data that's available to the solution, is one approach to keeping people safe. I think that as far as we're still in the very, very early stages, right? We're all using ChatGPT day in, day out. I certainly am. It's making me more efficient. But we're a long way away from agents doing the jobs of portfolio managers and picking stocks. We're making them much more efficient at doing that, and certainly gathering information. There's a lot of excitement right now about artificial intelligence and essentially replacing the role of a portfolio manager. I think the likelihood of that at the moment is still quite low, because at the end of the day, if the AI starts making the same conclusions as the other AI at the other firm, then by definition, there's no alpha left. So there's definitely room for humans in the loop and humans to do their own thing. Another big trend I think we're going to see is agent to agent. So you'll have an agent that's perhaps working on behalf of a portfolio manager, and that agent will decide that it needs to go and do some deep research on behalf of the PM, because maybe there's been an event, and that other agent might be much more specialized in that topic. It might have been trained on a small language model, and maybe it's an expert on some legal aspect of an industry, or maybe supply chain or something like that. So I think you're going to see a lot more of these complex workflows being built, through Lego blocks, and that will, I think, make those solutions much more robust.
Great. And I think, Max, over to you in terms of what's your view of your product evolving over the next 12 months? How quickly are you able to evolve given the rise of AI and the ability for AI to help you code, such as vibe coding? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so I think one of the things you recognize is there is a huge spectrum of people who are AI forward, AI build, if you will. And I think the focus that we have is, number one, finding these people in organizations and empowering them as much as we can. And what that means from I'm not talking about enablement side, but a technology side. How do we open up our platform so these people can really kind of spearhead adoption within their firms? But also, I think there is a ton more that firms like us can do to make the experience for end users who aren't necessarily AI forward immediately intuitive. I think about, how do I decrease the imagination threshold of a given user to the degree somebody logs in and has to figure out, how might I use this thing? You're lost. You're not going to win that user. And that's frankly most users is what we're seeing. So that's absolutely imperative. So it's to me, it's less about, okay, what are all the cool things we can build versus how can we meet any given user where they are and get them value like this.
There's one really good example of that, Maximilian, where if you think about our experience right now, where you ask a question of ChatGPT or Claude, and it will deliver the data in a table, even though that table is 50 lines long and would be better presented in a chart. So I think one thing we're going to see more of is those solutions really thinking about how to render the data and not using very expensive tokens to figure out how to build some code to render a chart, but that it will grab a chart component and drop the data into that.
I'll just double dip into what Max just said about adoption.
I was actually coming to you anyway.
Oh, you were.
So nice of you to step in.
Deja vu. So I have a real life example today where I've got a banking client and we are going down the path of developing a solution, agentic and otherwise, for them. One of the questions they had was, how do you increase adoption, right? Because if you can build this really slick, sexy solution, but no one really uses it, what's the point? So we've actually, I gave an example, and I was being facetious, but I gave the example of an engineer and an ethicist and a linguist and a philosopher. Yes, we have teams that kind of do that. We have product teams, we have engineering teams, et cetera, et cetera. We've also started introducing the notion of behavioral consultants, consultants who have a background in psych and other topics, where you can influence the build of the solution so that adoption further down the road is easier. So the simplest example I can give is, in this instance for this client, you have people, staff, who go from this spreadsheet to a Bloomberg terminal, different desk, different Bloomberg terminal, then they'll go somewhere else and they do something manually. The easiest engineering way to do this would be you automate everything, right? But in this instance, we want to make the person's life easier. And to keep it short, we have replicated some of the handoffs that this person does. Goes from desk to desk, but we've made that process simpler. So the person still feels that they're doing something meaningful, right? And their day is productive, but the tasks that they do, we've made them agentic. So in that case, adoption is significantly faster. And this client is going to see results that they wouldn't have seen before, if that makes sense.
Brilliant. So I think we've talked a lot about value over the next 12 months. What are we going to see? Now we're going to move on to a little bit about governance, right? And Atul, I'm going to start with you here because I know you advise a lot of your clients in terms of, they're starting off on their AI journey. What are the 3 core things you want them to make sure that they do upfront before they start on their journey?
I don't know if I'm going to have 3, but I'll try and keep it as 3. I would say responsible AI is another thing that we are actively talking to our clients on. And this is, in some cases, not just responsible AI with humans to satisfy the needs of the first line, the second line, and even the regulators. And in some cases, the board and other internal stakeholders that these clients may have. But it's actually introducing responsible AI guardrails through code, right? Through agents. If you can replicate SR11 is one example. Many of our clients have this. It's a mandate that they have to follow. The regulators follow it. Second line follows it. If we are now creating solutions that actually agenticize, if that's a word, certain aspects of SR11, so there's responsible AI through code. That's a big trend, in my opinion, which is building a solution is great, but if you don't have the guardrails around it, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
And I guess, Hema, like from BlackRock's perspective, massive company, what are you most proud about in terms of how BlackRock has governed the adoption of AI?
I was going to actually say something similar. We've actually built in these guardrails and I guess responsible AI tools directly into our AI platform. So all teams that are building things internally are going to be using those from default so that they're like the minimum requirement basically for all solutions. And then on top of that, we have AI councils that are built up of AI, ML subject matter experts and also domain experts that you're launching that tool or product into so that they can add any additional guardrails that we need to have for that specific domain. There's also legal and compliance involved in there. There's also risk councils. So even if it's a vendor solution, all of these tools that we're using have to go through this process and use a standardized, I guess, checks and balances across the firm.
Awesome.
So I think for AI there's some very interesting statistics that just came out. 90% of the firms try it, only 4% become successful, which is, I think, a very, very big gap. So for AI to be successful, I believe there are 3 components. Number 1, we have the right AI, meaning right models, right algorithm sophistication, right processing power. You have to have the right technology, right? That's a fundamental. Number 2, do you have the right operations, like 99% uptime, less than 2% RAG, the right, guardrails and everything else. Number 3, it's all about people. Do you have the right governance? Does 60% of your organization, grasp it and then, go for it? So if you get those, 3 components in place, it works. And to your question about governance and where the regulators come in, I think it's all going to come down to, can you go back and show where the data came from? What's the source of that data? Where it came from, and can you go back and also prove the decision-making process? Is the decision-making by an AI or is the decision-making by human? What was the reason for that decision-making? So that's going to become more and more, apparent. So if you get those 3 fundamentals right AI, right operational governance, and right, organizational governance, and if you can go back to your data sources and then always go back and create an audit trail, I think it's going to be successful.
That's great. I always love hearing audit trail. So thank you very much, everybody. I've got some rapid fire questions in this last minute. I'm going to ask, what is the one thing that keeps you up at night? And what is the one thing you wouldn't be able to live without if AI was taken away tomorrow?
What are my kids going to do as they get into college in this AI forward world?
I think to me is that this whole autonomous agents taking decisions, things getting so complex so fast, that is definitely a point. What was the second question?
what would you not be able to live without if AI was taken away tomorrow?
I mean, the investment committee reports, all the analyses and things like that go from days to months while they're today.
I guess for something we actually talk about at work is all these autonomous or like agentic frameworks competing against each other in the open market. You know, where does that lead? If it's just agents talking to each other, if they're all optimized a certain way, where is that going? Is the market going to be, I guess, artificially inflated in that way? That's something that could be worrisome coming up soon. What's something I can't live without? I think ChatGPT just released something yesterday where they're going to have guardrails around providing medical or legal advice to all their users, even paid customers, and I probably use it most for that. So that's what I can't live without.
So I think as an entrepreneur and a founder CEO, I think a lot about moats and where this stuff's all going, because moats are getting shallower and shallower. That's why we're very focused on providing data into these solutions, because I think there's a big moat there. I think as far as things I couldn't do without, look, I'm doing again, as a founder CEO, I do a lot of my own legal work. And I have to say, when you do a deal with a firm like Six, you have 58 pages of diligence on your company. And that got a lot easier when I just put all of our corporate registration data into one folder. And I filled out that diligence report instead of in 2 weeks, in about 2 hours. They were blown away. So I think as a productivity tool for a CEO, can't do without it.
Yeah, I think what keeps me up at night, maybe this is a little shorter term thinking, but buzzwords and abstractions keep me up at night, because I think that, you know, every time we get lost in that, it just creates more inertia and people get confused. There's lack of progress, lack of something concrete happening. So that's just, you know, kind of in a customer facing role, something that scares me. And then what I can't live without is, frankly, being able to step into any customer facing meeting in which within, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds, I can have a full dossier on who I'm speaking with, what their history is, what their firm cares about, strategic objectives, et cetera. I mean, this would take me hours at minimum and sometimes days. Like, having that at my fingertips has been absolutely unreal.
Great, excellent. Well, time is up. And thank you very, very much to our wonderful panelists. Really appreciate your insights. So please give them a round of applause.